Check, check. All right. I see there's a few here. Let me know if you can hear me okay. You know the routine. Excuse me. Hi, Scott and Tony on the starting block. Yeah, man. It's all good. It's all good. And just let me know if you can hear the guitar too. I'll check again just on here. Jerry's here. Good to see you. Good to hear you. I get little odd avatar pictures of you guys. They don't look like you at all, of course. That's okay. That's okay. Audio looks good. Check back here. Hey, Sean. Thanks for coming in, brother. Tony, not loud enough. Okay, not loud enough. Let's see what I can do here. You mean my voice or both? The guitar and well, maybe maybe you caught it at a time. Yeah, it's clipping out. Let me go back here. It's clipping out. Yep, now it should be very low. It's I think what's causing it potentially, there it just came back a bit, is that my wife is a counselor in the school system, and during the COVID times, she has to do her counseling online, streaming live to live students. And I think what's happening is the bandwidth is getting eaten up a lot, and as a result, my audio clips out. I think that's what's happening. So I might make it that either I change the time earlier or a little bit later, like 1 hour earlier, 1 hour later. I don't want to go too late because I know Tony's got to get to sleep. Just kidding you, man. So I know that I can hear it clipping myself. What can you do? But maybe the gods will be good, the digital gods, and let's see if I can pull that up a bit more. If I go too far, you get too much hiss and stuff. Don't want that. Okay, so let me know how it is now. Joanne, no video. Hold on a sec. I am streaming. I can see the live feed. There it is, he says. It's not Joanne. It's Kevin. Okay, thank you, Sean. Some good feedback. I did hear it clipping, so it might go in and out. I reviewed the last two classes even though I couldn't be here. Oh, it's okay, brother. That's Frank. Good to see you, man. If the audio's low right now, it might be. I apologize. As I said, I think there might be audio and video are good. Okay. All right. Well, we'll go with what we can do. I know the last session was really good. The audio stayed clean throughout, and then the one before it, as you know, clipped a lot. And happens to be on Mondays, it seems, a lot of the time when this is happening. So I can only think that it's a bandwidth issue because, as I said, my wife has to do some live streaming for her work. And we're conflicting. We're right at exactly the same time. Let me get rid of this. Hold on a sec. Bring that back up. Bring this back up. And not God tonight, Steve. Your sound is very soft and low. Yeah, is it, Tony, is it consistently soft and low for you? Is it coming up or down? Up and down, sorry. No, she's still in the hospital. My mom has been in for almost a week and a half now, but she's spoke to her this morning. There's much more energy and liveliness in her voice, so we're moving in the right direction. Thanks for asking, pal. Every setting that I have right now is exactly the same as what I've had when our sessions were good. So I think we're dealing with a bandwidth issue. Not good, not good, not good audio. So some people are getting good sound and some aren't. I don't know. It's beyond me. Okay, I want to get this cookie started. Consistently low. Is my voice better now, Tony? I just heard it click in, and now I hear it click out. Did you catch that? My audio levels are high. Everything's good. Shouldn't be consistently low. I mean, do you need to turn something up on your end, Tony? Maybe? Part of me's joking about that, but another part of me isn't. Yeah, but I can see it is what it is. All right, let's get going. We got a crowd here today. So again, here I am saying apologies for the audio that's going to probably clip out. And Tony, you're the only one who's telling me that it's consistently low. So I'm going to take my headphones off now. Must be my age. And I'm just going to get started here. And of course, when I have these off, when I have the headphones off, I can't hear when the audio is clipping out. So I'm just pretending that it's going to go well. And yeah, so that's what's going to happen. Okay, enough of that. All right, folks, welcome. Glad you're here again. as we venture through the COVID situation. And like I said before, however, I'm kind of enjoying this process. I hope you are as well, and I'd like to keep it going, such that excuse me, putting a good live session on perhaps once a week for all my subscribers. Day to be determined, but you know, because you're a subscriber, you would get access to this as a live gig, and then of course YouTube records it and it goes up, and then other people can watch it should they want to. But you guys get first dibs. I mentioned that number of emails ago, way back when. I know others can stop in and see us live, but they were not invited. They're not as special yet. All you have to do if you want to be as special is sign up to my email list. Become a subscriber, and that'll all change. So, Steve Dempster Guitar Studio. We are reeling from, I'm in Nova Scotia, East Coast Canada. And as perhaps many of you know, some of you may not, that we've had a miserable weekend with a terrible mass shooting occurrence in rural Nova Scotia. Now they're telling us it's probably one of the largest in Canada that's ever happened. So, wow. Not a nice claim to fame. Anyway, my thoughts are with the people whose family has been affected by some sudden death, and just another thing we have to contend with as we move through these times. Today, on a lighter note, we are dealing with the circle of fifths. I'm going to flip my screen here. And I would thank you, Joanna. She says it sounds great. We're dealing with something called the circle of fifths. And I'm going to try to walk you through the why of why it exists. This is something that shows up on guitar posters. I've mentioned this in the notes beneath the video when it gets posted. It shows up on mugs. It shows up on tattoos. It shows up in a lot of places. So much so that guitarists are very familiar with the image. But I think in its presentation, the way it's presented, which is accurate, there's nothing wrong with the way it's presented. Having said that, there are many versions of it. Some are more detailed than others. Some of the detail is not necessary. It's just some people like that stuff. But it's been presented in such a fashion and then used in such a way that guitarists especially view it with a certain amount of at least curiosity, which is great, and sometimes disdain. Because they see it as a very abstract thing, unrelated to the day-to-day of their playing. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's only abstract because you don't know how to use it. And the abstractness of it, I think, comes about as well because it's kind of very jam-packed. It's like a cheat sheet. If you recall the cheat sheet that I had the other day, with all the keys written out and all kinds of information spread everywhere. It's that. It's a summary of a lot of information in one place. But nobody just sat down and created it. There is a why to the whole thing, and it makes a lot of sense. If any of you are somewhat scientifically oriented and you've taken chemistry, you might recall the periodic table. What would a chemist do without the periodic table? It guides trend, it guides behaviors, chemical behaviors, it guides insight into what's happening into chemistry. And, very smart people, one in particular who got it started, I cannot recall his name, I see it sort of in my mind, um, was wise enough to start recognizing some interesting patterns that were going on. So we do the same thing in music because we're organizational creatures. We want to be able to make sense of stuff and organize it in a fashion that we can use. But again, I think its presentation has been confusing to many, and I want to try to walk you through a little bit of the logic as to why it exists, where it came about, at least the first half of the circle. I think I'm going to leave the second half for Wednesday because I want to make sure it's clear to you what's actually going on. So, without further ado, let me know in the chat, those of you that are familiar with it, and you know that I use the term familiar to mean you've seen it, but you don't really know how it works. And that's okay. That's where most people are. Let me know if you are that person, or if you are totally comfortable with the circle of fifths and you know how to use it and you know what value it has to understanding how music works. Maybe you ought not to join me today. Maybe I'll bore you with what I'm going to talk about. I don't know. Let me know. I want to know who's out there thinking about this apparently esoteric image. I'll grab my guitar. And you should grab yours too, I think. Sean, not familiar. Okay, brother, that's okay. So I described in the email that I wanted to take you on a walk through this thing, the circle or the cycle of fifths. Sometimes people will refer to it as I'm familiar with it, but I don't know how to. Okay, Tony, thank you. Sometimes people will call it the cycle of fourths or the circle of fourths. It's okay. It just depends on the direction you're moving, clockwise or counterclockwise. That's all that's referencing. Some claim there's more value seeing it as the cycle of fourths by observing that many chord progressions move in fourths, which is probably not something you're used to thinking about. You're probably just used to seeing chords on a song. I think I know it okay, but can't recall the order. Thanks, Frank. Oh, I just lost my frame of reference there. That's okay. I'll blame Frank for it. He won't mind. I pick on him a lot. So I want to walk you through it as if you were smart enough to come up with the relationships yourself. Not even smart enough, but they would be so obvious to you that you could yourself have assembled that information into that circle so that it doesn't continue to remain for you an abstract, esoteric thing. It isn't. It just is until you know about it. So I like to break things down in a manner where it could have been you that came up with it, if that makes any sense. So, no, I didn't have a seizure right there. I was just reading some of the comments. I know I just kind of blanked out. Boom. So that's what I want to do. And I think, like I mentioned, I want to do just the first half. So let me cue up an image of this thing. And there are many versions of it. Some are more detailed than others, some less so. But this one's kind of the normal version, I would say. So There it is, the circle of fifths. At the end of the session, I want to talk about some woo-woo, if you know that term, woo-woo, spooky stuff, that, for some reason or another, people associate with it. That somehow there's something mystical going on. I'm not giggling because I don't think it's true. I'm giggling because so many people have talked about it that it makes me wonder, maybe it is true. I don't know. Anyway, I'll leave that to the end so we can, end up with a bit of a laugh, should we choose. I don't believe in it, but you can take it for what it's worth. But that's a very common picture of the image. And so, as I mentioned, it shows up a ton on guitar posters and, with all the chords and all the, whatever's on the poster, it tends to show up as something apparently you're supposed to know and something apparently know rather well, or at least know it well enough that when you look at it, you know how to use it. This is a tool that's meant to be used. It's not just a summary of random information for you to stare at and go, well, how does that relate to me playing, Hoochie Coochie Man or Stairway to Heaven? On the surface, you could spend your whole life playing guitar and not use this thing at all. But as such, it is a summary tool, and it's a quick reference tool that if you made reference to it often, you would find it a very useful tool. Simple as that. So here's what I want to do. Oh, I'm going to get rid of there we go. Here's what I want to do. And again, unfortunately, I have if any of you know how to do this, I would appreciate it. I would love the ability to activate a cursor on the screen so that I could point to specific spots on images and stuff. Right now, and I've tried many things, I've looked it up left, right, and center with reference to the streaming software that I'm using. Although I can move my cursor on the screen, I don't think you see my cursor as I'm moving it. This is the challenge. I'd love for you to be able to see my cursor so I could point to specific things. As such, I have to speak precisely at times about where I need you to look. So if you're thinking, wow, there he goes again, he's talking a lot. In this case, I need to because I have to really describe to you where to focus your attention, if that's cool with you. Let's come back. We're good. Thank you very much. Okay. Circle of fifths. So it's laid out with the intention of revealing the 12 keys that are available to us in music, much like I did during the pre-Christmas time where I went through the 12 keys before Christmas kind of idea. This is that. This is that same experience, but brought together in one image. So as you can see, if you start at the top, just underneath the title, you can see C major. So these titles are sitting outside the circle. And if you move clockwise around the circle, you can see that we're moving from C major to G major to D major, etc., all the way around. If you take a bit of a closer look at it, as you go around, you'll notice that on the right side of the circle, those are the keys that are considered the sharp keys. Even the one that's at 6 o'clock, down at the bottom, the F sharp major or the G flat major, right at the very bottom. I often have seen this image presented with the bottom key as F sharp major. It's not a big deal here because it turns out that the number of sharps in F sharp major and or the number of flats in G flat major, two different keys, sort of, are the same number. So that's an interesting point at the bottom of the circle where there's going to be some transitioning from the right-hand side, which we're going to consider the sharp keys, to the left-hand side, which are considered the flat keys. I don't want you on today's session to get confused about the flat keys for the time being. I want you to just keep them out of your brain. As far as you and I are concerned, we're going to talk about C major, G major, D major, A major, E major, B major, and F sharp major, right at the bottom of the circle. It's not written as F sharp major, but that's okay. That's not a big concern for you today. What is of interest is what we're looking for are trends. We're looking for trends that are coming about for some reason and then getting summarized on this thing. Okay, so let me go back to my other screen. Let me see here, Frank. I think I know Frank. Saying chord progressive moving in fourths. Frank, you were saying don't always make a connection between. Not sure what Frank is referencing here. Saying chord prog move in fourths. I think I know it, but I can't recall the order. I did mention that the cycle can be considered the cycle or the circle of fourths as well. If you go, let me come back to the image here, for me anyway. If you go around the circle starting at C, okay, I'll start with the big picture here, and you go clockwise. If you pay attention to the keys that are coming up side by side, you'll notice that going from C to G to the right-hand side of the circle is a fifth. The movement from a C note, I'll prove it to you right here on my guitar. I want to see me doing it here. There we go. If there's a C right there, and I'm moving next to the key of G, there's a G right there. And if I put the two notes together, I think you'll agree that that's the familiar or a familiar power chord or a 5 chord. Technically, it's not even a chord, but we refer to it as. But what it is a fifth. From a C to a G using the C major scale. Here we go, C major scale. Keeps creeping up in everything you talk about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. C, D, E, F, G. Boom, boom. And then if I leave G and go a fifth higher than that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I end up on a D. So there's something going on there, clearly. Let me come back here. Whoop. Let me put that back up. Let's go here, and I want to bring the image back up. So you can see that as it go from C to G, that's the movement of a fifth, an interval of a fifth. You've heard that term from me before. If you go from G to D, that's the interval of a fifth. D to A is an interval of a fifth. D, E, F, G, A, 5 notes away. And you can continue to do this all the way around the circle till you come back to C. In theory. That's why I want to leave the second half of the circle alone. We're going to leave the flat side alone. But the right side of it follows true. C to G is a fifth, G to D is a fifth, D to A is a fifth, A to E is a fifth, E to B is a fifth, and I want you to think B to F sharp is a fifth. Because clearly B to G flat is not a fifth. B, C, D, E, F, G. That's 6 notes away. That's not a fifth. But B, C, D, E, F, in this case F sharp, is 5 notes away. That's all you need to think about for now. So the whole first half of this piece of pizza, all of these keys move apart from one another at intervals of a fifth. And the interval of a fifth could theoretically continue going around and up the flat side of the circle. But we don't do it that way. That's where this little transition at the bottom of the circle takes place. We'll talk about that more on Wednesday. So what you need to know for now is big picture. All of those keys on the right-hand side are separated from one another by fifths. Now, what you should be asking yourself is, well, what's so magical about a fifth? Like, why, if you're around music long enough and you study it, perhaps you're interested enough in it to want to take a harmony course or a little bit of a songwriting or composition thing, you would want to start asking the question, why does this thing, the fifth, keep showing up so much in music? And it does. There's no question that it does. I'm just checking questions again here. Tony, minor of each major is always the sixth. Is that correct? It's the sixth of the major scale, correct. And we'll get to the minors, not today, but we will before the week is out. All shall be revealed. I should put, here, check this out. I should be this guy. Let me bring up my live shot here. Look what I've got today. I should be the oracle, you see? Maybe I should keep that on for the whole session. Make the video go viral or something. I'm the oracle of the cycle of fifths. No, I won't do that. Not yet, anyway. Okay, so let me bring up the image again. Okay. Yeah, you should start to be wondering, what's the big deal about a fifth? Why did this thing get created in the first place? Well, let's take it on faith for the time being that you know that the major scale upon which all theory we ever talk about is fundamentally based. At some point, you can always retrace whatever you're asking back to that parent scale. Everything else is a child, in a sense. But back to that parent scale, you can trace it to the C major scale. And if you know that well enough, and you know how music works commonly from the major scale, then you will begin to see that this thing called the fifth keeps showing up. Now, I'm just going to give you a very quick example of it, and it's not miraculous or anything. It's something you've done many, many, many times in your own playing. Let's say I'm in the key of G, and I'm playing, it could be a pop tune, a rock tune, doesn't matter. And it's just going like this. It's going... just that. That's a G, moving to C, moving to D, and it's this thing. That sound happens so much in music that when you hear it, your ears, your brain, your understanding of music tells you the song is over and I can applaud now. As opposed to doing this. Like, it could almost feel like I was going to go back to G. Watch. Your experience hearing music all your life, Western style music that is, not country and Western, but Western civilization style of music, has built within it some pillars around which music is constructed commonly. All the big classical composers did it, and it has been something that has evolved and woven through our musical tapestry for thousands of years. And it's the fifth. There's something about the movement of a chord, commonly a chord, from the 5 chord of any major scale to the 1 chord. That movement seems to trigger within us a sense of finality, a sense that the song is done, which I find fascinating. I mean, it's just a sound, but it gives you a sense of it's done. So anyway, the point is that the fifth keeps showing up. Now, I want to demonstrate to you major fifth, perfect fifth. Yeah, no, I'm not referencing the specific type of fifth, Tony. I'm just going with a fifth for now. There are perfect fifths, there are diminished fifths, there are augmented fifths. There's no such thing as a major fifth. The naming of these intervals has its own study, and we could certainly engage in that at some point, but I wouldn't get too caught up with it right now. Stay on track. Okay, I'm going to bring up another image here to get this going. Just give me 1 second. That's not the one I want. Okay. Hey, that's got to look familiar. That is the key of C. And you know, I hope you know, the key of C is the only key that has no sharps and flats. But what it does have in common with all the other keys is that its architecture, the bones of it, which I have spoken at length about, is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. I can get rid of my guitar for a sec. Hold on. Okay. Tone, 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 semitone, tone, 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 semitone. I know you get that. I know you've heard it a lot, and I want you to hear it a lot because, as I've said, this is the foundation of understanding any, I'll call it theory because that's a common term. I hate the word. There is no theory going on in music. At best, this is analysis. At best, it is a language, and that's it. The word theory is just misused, in my opinion, in the context with which we interpret it in music. This is not theory. This is stuff that people have observed based on sounds that they like. And that sounds commonly got used over time because they got liked. Somebody codified it somehow. That's as far as you have to think about it. That's not theory. None of this is theory, but it gets presented that way. Okay, not going to go on that high horse for now. So far, so good. Now, here's a thought. If you look carefully at that image, and I don't mean the letters, forget the letters and forget the tone, tone, semitone, but look at the geometric shapes I've put between them. They represent tone, tone, and semitone. The big box is the tone stuff, and the smaller rectangle is the semitone. So tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Okay, fair enough. Now, let's pretend for a moment that you, like right now, had a lot of time on your hands, and you were just curiously looking at that, and you thought to yourself, wait a second now. If I look carefully at it, I can see that the first 4 letters, C, D, E, F, have the structure of tone, tone, semitone. Let me know in the chat box that you understand what I just said, that the first 4 letters have built within them from C to D is a tone, from D to E is a tone, and from E to F is a semitone. Just say that you can see it or you can't. You're right, Frank. The 5, we talk about it that way. The 5 wants to resolve back to the tonic. The tonic is the first note of the scale. I haven't spoken much about this yet. Every scale degree has its own name. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. But for example, the C is the tonic, the D is the supertonic, E is the mediant, F is the subdominant, G is the dominant, A is the submediant, B is the leading tone. Oh my gosh, some people have a lot of time on their hands. It's really cool stuff. And it on the surface, it doesn't make you play Stairway to Heaven any better, but it does help you understand why Stairway to Heaven makes you feel so good. There's stuff going on. Now the elusive fifths are starting to make sense. Yes, I can see it. Good. You can see this. Now, pretend for a moment that we took the C, D, E, and F part, and we just gently pulled it away from the rest of the scale. What you'd be left with, obviously, is the G, A, B, and C part, the upper part of the scale. So you have a lower part of the scale that's made up of 4 notes. Bear with me here. This will make a lot of sense shortly. And then you have the second half of the scale also made up out of 4 notes. But look at the structure of the part that is left over. And to do so, you have to just get rid in your mind's eye of the box between the notes F and G. Just mentally get rid of that box so that you can see that the lower part of the scale is absolutely identical in structure to the upper part of the scale. Even though probably for for some time now, you've been walking around going tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, or in terms of frets between notes, 2-2-1, 2-2-2-1 along one string. That may be floating in your head, and that's right. There's nothing wrong with it. But what I want you to now do is mentally split this whole scale right in half between the notes F and G, which effectively gets rid of that box. And notice that C, D, E, and F are tone, tone, semitone. And the upper half, G, A, B, and C, are tone, tone, semitone. That's an interesting observation that somebody made. I don't know when, don't care when, but they made it. And guess what they did, ladies and gentlemen? They did what I've always been saying to people to do when they get an observation or they get a concept or they whatever, something new to them, some insight. You go and play in the sandbox. And that's exactly what this person did. Now I'm going to pull up the next image so you can see this a little more clearly. So there it is. So we've split the thing in half. Now here, what I'm trying to do is pretend like I'm that person, and I'm going, what happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? Which, if I'm lucky, by the end of today, by the end of our session, will have explained to you why the circle of fifths is structured the way it is, which will help you know how to use it. Because when you're just told, well, it teaches you the key signatures, which it does. It tells you how many sharps there are in a key, which it does. But for you just to go away and blankly just take that information and go, well, okay, that's what it does, that's kind of empty to me. I want you to almost have the experience, as I said, that you could have discovered this yourself if you played in this sandbox. Maybe you haven't played in this sandbox before. So here we are. So there it is. You can see it. The first half, the first 4 notes of the scale, in terms of the language of music, we call it a tetrad. 4 notes, that's all. The lower tetrad, and then the upper tetrad. And the 2 tetrads are structured exactly the same. That's the point. Is it clear so far? I don't want to move too quick before people get, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm going to try not to get it crazy. Let me know that you can see it. And maybe even let me know that you've never seen that before. You've gained a little bit of insight as to what you might do next in your sandbox. Interesting. So here's what whoever did this did. They said to themselves, once they made this observation, and by the way, in general, just take this on faith for now, the major scale comes from nature. It's not a made-up thing. When you play one sound, there are lots of other sounds emanating from that one sound called harmonics. And when you have the technology to analyze those sounds, which are very, very faint, they're very difficult to hear. Some of them easier to hear than others, but they're faint. But when you can figure them out, you get what we now refer to, and when you put them in order of certain frequencies, you get the major scale sound. It comes from nature. So, Scott says never seen before. I've never seen that before. Well, you do now. And Scott, hopefully that means that you've never seen it before and not that you're not getting it. Okay, I'll take it on faith. That's just something you've not observed. But it's there. It's not woo-woo. It's just nature. Okay, here's what the person then probably said to themselves. Remember, I'm taking you on a walk as if you're in their mind. That's curious. The top part of this scale is identical in structure to the bottom part. So, why don't I take the top part and pretend for a moment that it's the bottom part of what will become a G major scale? You see how that person's thinking, which is me, I guess. Because they're the same structure, why can't the GABC part be treated as if that's the beginning of a new scale? Well, of course, we can. We can do that. It's easy. We just do it. That's all. So there it is. So let me be clear here. C major scale at the top. Person observed that when you split the scale directly in half, the two halves are identical in structure. That means that the part that starts with G is on its way to sounding like a G major scale. So let's start that. Let's take it and begin to build a G major scale. Well, in order to do that, of course, and this is the lower image, you start the G, A, B, C. That's fine. Intrinsically, there'll be a whole tone between the notes C and D. We know that, but we're not including it right now because I want you to still visually see these two separate bits working. And then you'll add the other notes, D, E, F, and G. Now, I'm going to invoke my guitar now. I'll get rid of this image. I will come back to it, I promise. So, the first experience was that you went C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and you recognize that the first four notes, C, D, E, F, tone, tone, semitone, were exactly identical to starting on G. G, whole tone, semitone. When you saw that, you thought, well, let me then begin to take the upper part and start a new scale with it called G major. So I have now G, G, A, B, C, D. The E comes out, the F comes out, and the G comes out. But that in and of itself isn't the sound of G major, is it? Listen to it. What we want is this. It's just the difference between F natural and F sharp. So when you do this, when you make the G major scale from that initial fragment, G, A, B, and C, in order for it to be the sound of a major scale, just like the sound of C major, you had to make the F natural F sharp. And all of this was covered in the 12 Keys Before Christmas and to some extent in Where Stuff Comes From. So if you have real deep trouble with what I'm talking about, you can always reference back to that. But the point here is that when you complete this new scale, including the F sharp, you have now created a G major scale. It's not G minor, it's not G octatonic, it's not G altered, it's a G major scale. And as such, you had to raise the F to F sharp. As such, in the key of G, there's one sharp. There are no sharps and flats in the key of C. There's one sharp in the key of G, and it's always F. Is this making sense? Have I lost you? Tony wants a PDF on these. Does that mean you really like what you're getting, or you just want to study it after I'm finished bantering about it? It's crazy, eh? Looks like people are kind of digging it. That's good. I'm glad. Yeah, I'd be happy to put some PDFs together. Send them out to you. For my peeps, I will do that. Let me go back here. Now, I'm not going to go back to any images right now. I want you to really think about what we just did and pretend that you're now the person. This is where you can now play with, if you have your guitar handy, play a G major scale, just starting on the 6th string, 3rd fret, and if you can, or anywhere or any way that you know how to do it, just get a G major scale under your fingers. And by the way, and I'm serious about this, if me just asking you to do that is so far removed from your current guitaring education / experience, you need to contact me, because that's a serious flaw in the tools that you should have to help you understand how, again, anything in music works. If you're really good at using minor pentatonic, awesome. If you're really good at changing chords to your favorite song, awesome. If you're really comfortable being up on stage and playing tunes with a band, awesome. Whatever it is you do currently with guitar is fantastic. But if you cannot, just simply play a G major scale without much confusion or hesitation. If you can't do that, I want you to really think about why that has happened and why. I'm not saying you did it to yourself, but why are you continuing to allow it to be a weak area? It shouldn't be. It should be probably the strongest of everything you've ever worked on in guitar. It's not the sexiest. This is the thing. This is way more sexy. I get that. It's fun, it's sexy, it's all of it. And have with it. But make sure you can do this. That's me being Papa Steve. Okay, G major scale. Now you're going into the sandbox and you're thinking, if it's true that the bottom end of any of these major scale things is identical in structure to the top end, the technical language is the lower tetrad is identical in structure, tone, tone, semitone, to the upper tetrad, 4 notes, tetrad, tone, tone, semitone. If that's true, and it is, I could take the G major scale now and do exactly the same thing I did with the C major scale. I could take the first four notes, G, A, B, C, and then get the next four notes, if I play them out according to the key of G, then I would add that F sharp in. I would have to, in order to make the transition to the key of G major. And that's what this image, if I can come back to it here, that's what that image is doing. That you took the upper part of C and you used it as a beginning point to build another major scale that's almost identical, same letters, almost identical to the key of C except for one, which is F sharp. It's the closest sounding scale to the C major scale that you're ever going to get. Well, F is also pretty close as well. Now, couldn't you therefore, from your G major scale, G, A, B, C, D, G, A, B, C, and then the D part, starting on D, which is the fifth note of the scale, by the way, begins the start of a new major scale called D major. So you go, oh, let's try this. I can take the upper part of G major. I know that I'm talking a lot here. I take the upper part of G major, and I can observe that when I play it, it's identical to the lower part of G major. So it could become the beginning of its own new major scale. D, E, F sharp, G. D, E, F sharp, G. And if I make what I'm going to play subsequent to that, D, E, F sharp, G, and then A, B, C, because C is in the G major scale, C, D, oops, that doesn't sound like a major scale. Remember, this is you playing in the sandbox. You're just exploring this with innocent curiosity. So you go, oh, I'm going to have to change something in this new scale to make it sound like the other scales. D, E, F sharp, G is what I've got. A, B, C, D are the next four notes that are potentially part of that scale, but it doesn't sound like a major scale. And the note in question that's making that different sound is a C. So you would have to go from C to C sharp. Okay? Now let me get rid of that and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So here I am on D. And I'm now playing the upper part of that G major scale. This is just an observation. It's a curiosity, and you're just trying to push it as far as you can. D, E, F sharp, G. All is good. That sounds like a major scale so far. A, B, C, D. That's a C, D. Doesn't sound like a major scale anymore. Most of it does, but there's a part that doesn't. So I have to take that C, this is the part that doesn't, and I have to raise it up by one fret to C sharp. Now listen to it. And if you stood back and looked at it from 30,000 feet and asked yourself, well, what notes then are altered in the key of D? You would say D, E, well, F sharp, G, A, B, oh, C sharp too. And then you're done. So now you have three scales. One of them is C, sounds like a major scale. We did some we did some playing in the sandbox. We converted the top part of C major into a G major scale by having to alter one of the notes, and it was F sharp. You were forced to do it. Nature said you have to alter that note because it doesn't sound like a major scale. I know that's probably not the best final answer to things, but that's how I want you to think about it. So you got this. The bottom half was very much a C major scale just starting on G. But in and of itself, it sounded like a G. The upper half is the problem. So we started the next bit of the upper half became the fuel for the next new scale. I hope I'm making sense here. I might be repeating myself too much. So the fifth note up from G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that began the next bit for the D major scale. Da, 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 da. So we used that to be able to build a new scale called D major. There's the first bit that's been transferred from the old G scale. And then we added the known extra notes that we needed. A, B, C, D, but the C itself doesn't sound right. So we sharpened it. By the way, the reason you know to sharpen it is because you know the sound of a major scale. I guess I'm assuming that you know that sound. It's not just a finger pattern, it's a sound. You could hear a flute player in the forest doing it, and you go, oh, that's a major scale that person just played. Maybe not in that order, but you can tell that it's a major scale. I can recognize. That's what I'm talking about. So if you come back to this image, we started with C. We took the upper part of C. It began to build a new scale called G. And then we took the upper part of G, starting on D, and we could build a new scale starting on D. I'll pull up this image for you. There's the original G scale at the top. If you look at the top part of the G scale, it looks like the beginning of a major scale, and it is. So let's use it. So I bring it down below, and I write D, E, F sharp, G. Originally, I would continue on with A, B, C natural, and D, because C is natural in the key of G, the originating scale. But when I played this whole new thing out, it didn't sound like a major scale. So I was smart enough in my sandbox to say, oh, I have to raise C to C sharp to make it not only sound like a major scale, but make it so that there's a semitone at the tail end between C sharp and D, just like F sharp and G in the major G major scale. You following me so far? If I've lost you, let me know. I lost you. Okay. Really like it so far. Okay, Sean, he's still hanging on. Tony sounds like he lost my signal, but I'm back now. Okay, that's good. All right, I'm just going to keep going here. So you could then stand outside of your sandbox and say, the key of C ended up having no sharps and flats. For the reasons I just walked through, the key of G has one sharp in it. For the reasons I just walked through, the key of D, which is the part of the G major scale is the beginning part of the key of D, ended up with two sharps in it. But the important thing to recognize is as you go through this, there's pattern that's unfolding. Key of C to key of G are a fifth apart. Why are they a fifth apart? Because I decided, because of this internal structure within a major scale, to begin a new scale on the fifth note of the original scale. That's where the separation of these keys in fifths is coming from. So that when you're looking at this image, you understand why do we go from a C major to a G major. Because in C major, the first four notes, the lower part, C, D, E, and F, they're fine. The upper part, in terms of tone, tone, and semitone, they're fine. The upper part of the same C major scale, starting on G, which is the fifth note of the scale, G, A, B, C. finishes that G major scale. That's where the cycle of fifths is coming from. I hope this is starting to make sense. You may have to think on this a little bit, but it isn't intrinsically that difficult. Now, if I go back to, where am I here? If I continue with this thinking, here's what we end up with. Key of C had one sharp. We know that. The top part of the key of C began the bottom part of the key of G. And then I had to alter the continuing top part of this new scale called G major by raising one note, and that was F raised to F sharp. That's why there's one sharp in the key of G. It can be written, as you know, on paper, and you can visually recognize it. You can recognize it in your ear when you're playing. And of course, all of this information affects the type of chords that get built from these scales. The upper part of the key of G, D, E, F sharp, D, has exactly the same structure as a major scale. So I took it, and it began to build the next scale, D major, D, E, F sharp, G. I filled in the rest of the notes, A, B, C, D, that follow alphabetically, only to realize that the C natural note doesn't sound right. I had to raise it to C sharp. So now this thing sounds like a major scale, and when you sum it up, you can see there's two sharps in the key of D. The important thing to recognize is moving from G to D is a fifth away, and in doing so, I went from one sharp to two sharps. If you follow the sequence, this repeats itself all the way down. This is to the bottom of the circle. That as you move for every fifth, D to A, key of D to A, is in the green letters here I'm looking at. D to A. By the way, I only know they're green because I was told I am colorblind. So, but they look greenish, yellowish, orangish kind of to me. I don't know, somewhere in there. D to A is a fifth away. But when you look at the sharp content, you only added one extra sharp to get to A. A to E is a fifth away. You added an extra sharp. You're forced to do it. It's not something esoteric. It's just a natural outcrop of the process of playing in the sand. You took the lower half of one or the upper half of one scale and used it as the beginning architecture of a new scale. And as you did that, extra sharps needed to be added, and as you did that, the keys were separated in fifths. How am I doing? If I go back to the original image, you can see it. If you look inside the first layer of circle, the outer layer of the circle, where you see things that are called key signatures, where all those hashtag and lowercase b's are sitting. The hashtag is a sharp sign in music, and the lowercase b, it's kind of a squashed b, is a flat sign. You can see this. C major has none. G major has one. But now you know why it has one. You had to go a fifth away, C to G, in order to get that. And it made sense to go a fifth away because the upper part of the C major scale is identical to the lower part of a G major scale. It just sort of makes sense to do that. Your own curiosity would have driven you to do it, fundamentally. When you go from G to D, a fifth away, you get two sharps. Now you know why. You go from D to A, a fifth away, you get three. And it just keeps going. A to E, you get 4. E to B, I'm almost at the bottom of the circle, you get 5. And now I want you to think B to F sharp, right at the bottom of the circle. Instead of seeing those 6 flats, I would just want you to imagine that there are 6 sharps. They'd be written differently on the staff, but that doesn't matter. So as you go from top, let's say noontime, until 6 o'clock, you're going, in terms of sharps, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that reveals itself because of this playful experience of saying, I'm going to take the top part of C major and treat it like the bottom part of a new scale called G major. What happens? What happens is your G major scale needs an F sharp in order to make it sound like a major scale. I'm going to turn over here and see. So this just explains why. Hanging on, I need a good sandbox. Got you back. Okay, so Scott, and where? So this explains why and where. What are you referring to there? I'm not quite sure, Scott. It explains why what? Why the circle is the way it is? Or whatever. Just let me know. But that's all that's happening. It's a very natural, organic observation, essentially, that someone made, I don't know who, about some apparent patterning that was going on. And we do this naturally anyway. Architects do it. Nature does it, by the way. We have a certain symmetry to our bone structure, typically. That's a good thing. It's a pattern, right? The sharp signs go. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, don't worry so much about where they go in terms of on the staff, though, on the lines. Just know that they exist this way for the time being. Let me pull up the other image. Just be aware of that. It's the same thing as the circle of fifths. I just drew them out individually. That's it. This is just the first half. I didn't put C in here because you already know C. Okay. So when somebody says we're going to jam in the key of A, eventually, as you've played in the sandbox, you're just going to remember that A has three sharps. Now, you might go, well, why do I need to remember that when I can just play the pattern that I learned for an A major scale? Let me come back to me here. And this is a very guitarist thing to do. Like, oh, why do I need that? I just know this pattern. Somebody wrote it on a piece of paper for me in tablature, and I practiced it. And I know that that's A major. And you can jam with it, and you can. Here's the thing. In the culture of playing music, like it or not, people can tell, not the average person, but a well-trained musician can tell whether you're aware of what you're doing or not. And what I mean by that is, as a chord in the key of A changes to the D chord, obviously the two chords have different notes in them. Some of them are shared, but most of them are different. When you're soloing, the art of soloing is the art of connecting the individual notes that you're playing with the chord that you're currently on, and how you can weave that thinking through several chords, making a nice fluid line of melody. It isn't just about shredding a pattern that's been well worn and practiced. It could be for a moment or two, but then get away from it and come back to making music that people can hum to, right? Nobody can hum a shred. A shred is just a moment of technical dexterity that is cool to display, may or may not serve the music. Oftentimes people use it too much because they interpret speed as equivalent to competence. I don't practice shredding a lot myself, but if speed equals competence, if that's the way you read it, and by the way, that's usually, the teenage crowd for the most part, not us, obviously, then that means that you value people who talk faster than people who don't talk fast. Like you would value an auctioneer. You can be moved by the skill of the ability to do that. But I don't know about you, but half the time I can't tell what the person's saying. You have to cultivate an ear for it. They're going so quickly. I don't know what they're saying. And I certainly don't put any value in it because I want to be able to talk to people, not a machine. So anyway, without getting on a high horse there, some people interpret that as soloing, and it really isn't. It's a moment of virtuosity that's fun to display, and it may or may not fit the music that's necessary. That's a personal choice. But the real game of soloing is as you solo to weave in and out of chords such that if you took all the chords and everything away, if I heard your solo, I would hear the chords change within your solo. If you're only aware of pattern when you play, oh yeah, man, I learned this pattern 10 years ago for the A major scale. If all you know is pattern and you're not thinking A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C, D, E, if you're not thinking that, I don't mean think it while you're playing it, but that you're confidently aware of it, it will be virtually impossible. I wouldn't say completely because you can use your ear, but you're very limited in your ability to make those kinds of connections. So that's where that stuff becomes somewhat important. So there we have it. It's just this basic observation. If I go back to, where am I here? Let's go to this guy and pull him up and get rid of that one. That guy. Comes back to that basic observation that the lower half of a major scale is the same as the upper half. And because the upper half is, in terms of its structure, and because the upper half is the same, let's go and see what happens if we build a new major scale starting on the upper half. That's all it was. And because the upper half started on a note that's 5 notes away from the original scale, that's where the circle of fifths came about. That's why everything that moves around this circle is fundamentally in fifths going clockwise. And the inversion of the fifth, when you turn it upside down, is a fourth. Don't worry about that. And that would be your experience if you traveled counterclockwise around here. We're not going to talk about that right now. But that's the point I wanted to get clear. With time and experience, eventually you just remember that G has 1, A major has 3 sharps, B major has 5. You'll remember it quicker if you're being tested on it. You won't remember it at all if every time you look at this image you go, oh, there's that thing again. God knows what that means. Let's just get on and do some playing. And there is a time for that, of course. There's so much information in here. I'm going to leave you with a little woo-woo right now. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, but I'll cover it more in depth on Wednesday. If you look in closer toward the inside, not the outside circle, but the second circle, and not the bullseye, the second circle where you see A minor, E minor, D minor. These are the relative minors for each of its associated major scales. So for C major, the relative minor is A minor. For G major, it's E minor. For D major, it's B minor. And there's a relationship there. I forgot who said it in the chat, but it's based on the 6th degree of the major scale. It's very simple. What's the 6th degree of C? C, D, E, F, G, A, A minor. What's the 6th degree of D? Let's look at the D major. D, E, F, G, A, B, B minor. Cool. So the inside part has the minor keys covered. Now, a lot of people say stuff like this. Wow, this thing kind of looks like a clock. Has 12 keys. There's 12 hours in a clock. In fact, some people have caught on to that. They're actually manufacturing clocks for musicians that look like the circle of fifths. So the arms move around as normal, but they do so through the cycle of fifths, just at the image you're looking at. It's a novelty gift, right? Usually they come out around Christmas time, stuff like that. That's kind of cool. 12 months in the year. 12 notes in our musical system. 12 keys. That's kind of woo-woo. 7 notes in every major scale. 7 days of the week. That's kind of weird. Stuff like that. Let's look at this. Go to C major. How many, I'll go up here for a sec so you can see me. How many of you know the 1, the 4, and the 5 chord in the key of C? Tell me what they are. like real fast. Put them in the chat box, and then the time delay will kick in. I think I'm picking up what you're dropping. Thank you, Scott. I like how you break up your sentences in a funny, humorous way. And where, next note, the sharps go, next note, in the scale. That's cool. Anyway, I think you would realize, okay, key of C, 1 chord is C, 4 chord is F, 5 chord is G. And maybe you've played that a gamillion times in your life, right? I'm going to go to A minor. F, C, G, A minor. Yep, you guys are getting it. Okay. There, I just played a little ditty. Let's go back to the image here. Look at the key of C at the top. Look to the left of it. Key of C is your 1 chord. F is your 4 chord, F major. Now go to the right of C. G is your 5 chord. Ooh. How about this? Go over to the A major. The A major key. So go counterclockwise to D above it. That's your 4 chord. A, B, C, D. Now go clockwise one more. That's E major. A, B, C, D, E. That's the 5 chord. So this thing is very practical. This can lay out for you if you have trouble pulling out the 1, 4, and 5, for example, of a song. Let's pretend you're more into jazz and you're doing a song in the key of E flat. Let's just hop over to the left side. E flat's at 3 o'clock. Go counterclockwise. That takes you down to A flat. There's your 4 chord, and B flat is your 5 chord. And this happens all the way around the circle. Come back to C major. C is 1, F is 4, G is 5, and look, go inside. I can play A minor, or D minor, or E minor. In the key of C, I've got all except 1 chord accounted for in the circle of fifths. In the key of C, I've got the 1 chord at C, the 4 chord F, the 5 chord G, the 6 chord is A minor, the 2 chord is D minor, and the 3 chord is E minor. The only one missing is the 7th chord, which is a diminished chord. Doesn't show up in this image. Look at that. In a little slice of the pizza, you have all the chords available to you, in any key, and they will always occur in the sequence that you see it in that little slice. That's pretty darn cool if you ask me. This is not a hunk of theory that's just dangling in your brain and serves no function. This is where the rubber hits the road summarizing tool. It's like a cheat sheet, if you will, available to you instantly if you understand how it's been built. And that's been the point of today. I hope that makes sense, guys. I'll come live here again. When I was training this, here's what we had to do. I mean, it's the stuff you kind of know you should be doing, but, I don't know. People, I don't know. But this is what we did. You'd have to go C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, or G flat, D flat, A flat. Where am I at? B flat, sorry. B. And then F. I'll do it up here. And that's just on the one string set, and we'd have to carry it across all the string sets. Later, you'd have to be able to go C, G. You'd have to stay in one position and find it. Now, if you really, really, really want to know your fretboard, to me, that's the kind of exercise that's going to get you there a lot quicker, as I've said before, than just, okay, that's a C, that's a C sharp, that's a D. That's not going to work. So, okay, I'm done. I hope that helps a little bit. I want to continue the discussion on Wednesday, and I want to talk about the second half of the cycle, coming up the flat side, because there's a logic there that I want to reveal to you as well that's not present in the sharp side. And we're going to play a bit of a game, so be ready for that. I will put together some form of a PDF with this info for you guys if you think it's helpful to have. And when it's ready, I'll just fire it out to everybody, and those that want it can open up their email and do so. And those that don't want it, that's fine. That's, can't make the horse drink. You can only bring him to the well, right? That's the idea. Let me see here. Frank, see it at the top of the wheel. Can also be the order of sharps and flats as they appear. It is hidden in there. The order of sharps and flats is not a big deal, but it moves in fifths as well. For example, in the key of, let's say, A, there are 3 sharps. And I could, if you want, I could go through how I was taught to remember this. It's the language, some of the language is a little bit old. But for example, if the exam question said, how many sharps are there in the key of A, we had to remember, I'm going to come back to this here, we had to remember 2 sentences. The first was, and I haven't thought on this for quite a while actually, first was, God destroyed all earth by flood. It's not a reference these days, I guess we're more secular than back then, but, don't be offended by the fact that the reference to a deity is in there. God destroyed all earth by flood. You just had to remember it. And then we had to remember, again, with reference to religion and priestliness, don't forget, music was heavily organized by the church for a very, very long time. It's only more recently that it's become more secular than ever. Back in the day, like I said in one video, the church ran who had access to music. So a lot of people, the type of music they heard was religious-based music. That's all they heard all their life. And if you weren't playing that kind of music, good luck to you. If you were found out, things could get pretty nasty for you back in the day. Anyway, the second sentence was, Father Charles goes down and ends battle. Those were 2 sentences we had to remember. And it was for this reason. Hey, Steve, how many sharps are in the key of A? Okay. I would say the first sentence, God destroyed all. The letter A. God destroyed all. G-D-A. God destroyed all. 3 words into the sentence meant that there were 3 sharps in the key of A. But Stephen, what were the sharps? That's where the second sentence comes in. Father Charles goes down and ends battle. Father Charles goes. 3 words in, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp. That's how I did it. There are some other shortcuts people take today. A lot, I think, in my generation still learned it that way. But when you look at it, F, G, A, if you go Father Charles go, if you go through the sharps in the key of A, and the way they're written on the musical staff would be F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp going left to right. Here, I'll show it to you in the image. See? Key of A at What am I dealing with? Yeah, key of A, A major. And the first hashtag on the right next to the treble sign there is F sharp. And then the next one lower is C sharp. And then the highest sitting one is G sharp. Father Charles goes. And they're written in that order. And you can see they continue in that order all around the circle for as long as sharps exist. So what's happening is they're getting written in fifths. F to C, F, G, A, B, C. That's F to C, C to G, C, D, E, F, G. So the fifth thing is a really prevalent concept in music. Don't treat it small. It's like a pillar to how our Western style of making music exists. This is not a trivial image. It's not hard to understand unless you take some time to sit with me and work through it. But that's the that's the idea. Any final questions for today? Again, I'm going to come back to it on Wednesday. I'm going to kind of do some more stuff with it. And depending on that goes, I may do a little bit more on Friday just to wrap it up, just to give you a sense of it. But that's the main idea. The PDF would be very helpful. Thanks, man. Okay, Sean, I'll do that. Can also, yeah, I got that one. Sean, could you put those examples in the PDF? Sounds like a great way to remember. Those two sentences? I certainly can. I don't mind doing it. And at this point, what happens, of course, if you're constantly being asked by your teacher or whoever, key of E, go. That's what happened. I mean, I know you guys don't go through that. It's too bad. They don't do it much today. Your teachers give you patterns and things to play, and it's fun, and it's sexy, and I get it, but it's not foundational necessarily. And I might be unfairly picking on people because, there's oodles of great teachers out there. But the overall trend is that we get away from this information. Wouldn't be at all unusual. And I did this all summer long when I can't remember now. I might have been 13 or 14, somewhere around there. I did a workshop. It was a summer workshop. That's why I don't get why people don't study guitar in the summer. They all just want to go to their cabin. I didn't ever do that. I thought, hey, I'm out of school. I have tons more time to study guitar. That's what my brain said, so I did that. I took stuff during the summer, a lot. I did a workshop with my teacher. It was all about chords and key signatures and blah, blah, blah. And every day, every morning we'd come in. This was a 2-week workshop. He'd go, hey, might have been 6 of us in the workshop. Steve, key of B, go. Oh my gosh, key of B, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, E sharp, A sharp. And then you had to recite this. What are the chords in the key of B? Oh, we got B major, C sharp minor, D sharp minor. And, you had to do all this over and over and over. But it wasn't tedious. I never perceived it as tedious. It was informative. It made this make a ton of sense. When I looked down on the B chord after recalling all that info, I looked down on it, I thought, and still do, well informed. I know what notes I'm playing. I know what chord, obviously, it is. I know where to play it in multiple locations on the fretboard. I understand how it fits within the key. If you want me to play in the key of B, I can play in the key of B. It's as simple as, hey, Steve, tell us a little bit about wormholes. Like, I'm into cosmology and stuff like that. Yes, I can have a reasonably intelligent conversation with you about wormholes. But it's because I've been exposed to it a lot. I've made myself exposed to it a lot. So I'm kind of trying to get you excited about it too. But I won't push it too far. Okay, gotta go. Off to the sandbox. Send the PDF, please. I'll do all that for you guys. Don't worry. Yeah, we're safe here. Everything's cool. They're still doing the investigations and trying to figure stuff out. Steve Dempster, Dempster Guitar Studio. go and study that not PDF, the circle of fifths. Just think on it. And by the way, just very quickly, it does have a sound to it, right? You go C, G, D, A, E, B. It has a sound. It actually sounds musical, and I'll bet there's some tunes you've you've heard that have that quality. It's a beautiful thing. Steve Dempster, Dempster Guitar Studio. Talk to you guys on Wednesday. You have yourself a great couple of days. And thanks for listening, and I very much appreciate it. Cheers, bud. Oh, yeah, Tony, it is another book. I'll talk about it on Wednesday. I forgot about it. It's a new one. See you guys. Bye.